Welcome to Bad Meetings Podcast, where we embrace the awkward, the weird, and everything in between when it comes to professional and sometimes not so professional meetings. I'm Erika McKellar. I used to be a people-pleasing conflict avoider, but that wasn't working. So I went all in. I even got a master's degree in conflict resolution. And I spent the next decade learning hands-on how tough experiences can actually improve our work life. On this podcast, I chat with people who have gone through it. We break down their bad meeting story, find the lessons, and share tips on how to have better meetings. It's simple, but it's not easy. You may just learn something from someone else's mistake. Listen in and reach out if you have a bad meeting story to share. Thanks for listening. Hey listeners, welcome to the Bad Meetings Podcast, where we share stories of inspiring and sometimes not so inspiring workplace encounters. We are now on our 6th episode, and it has been an experience. I was just telling my guest today, I've met some really unique and inspiring entrepreneurs who are willing to try something a little bit different, and we definitely do things differently here on Bad Meetings Podcast. If I could sum this up in one sentence, and Malcolm, I know you are the king of elevator pitches. Let me know what you think about this. We are here at Bad Meetings Podcast to help you learn from others' mistakes because life is too short to make them all on our own. What do you think?
Love it. I love it.
Great. Okay. So Erika McKellar here, and I have 20 years of experience of consulting in startups all the way through large corporations. And specifically, I have a fascination with conflict and how we can use conflict to grow and healthy conflict. And a lot of people don't put those words together, but I definitely do. I'm a big advocate of it. So today I'm so excited to have Malcolm Larri here. And did I pronounce your last name correctly? Just making sure.
Larry.
Larry.
Happy as Larry, right?
Larry, right? You know, the American way. Larry.
Yep.
That's how I say it. And you are originally from Sydney, which is one of my favorite cities in the whole world.
Right.
All right, a little bit about you, Malcolm. You are a leadership coach and speaker with nearly 25 years of experience, and you are a master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. I'd love to hear more about that, by the way. And you've led workshops around the world. I've watched a few of them online, and you help people and companies use their unique strengths to drive change, a change maker. I love it. I fancy myself a change maker as well, maybe not so eloquently, but I'm really happy to have you on this podcast. And what we're going to do today, like we always do, is first of all, I want you to introduce yourself and say something unique about you that you might not share in your everyday podcast. Because if we can, I want to make some of these episodes a little bit more fun and inspiring and just, let's just play a little bit more. I feel like we're too serious, right? We're too serious and it can be a little bit stifling. So let's go there and then we'll jump right into your bad meeting story. And This can be, it doesn't have to be, exceptional. It doesn't have to be a blockbuster. It just has to be a real story that you experienced that had an impact on you. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Malcolm.
Yeah. So, I'm a leadership and culture consultant out there working with, leaders and companies and their teams every day and really working. Really, my value proposition is managing change. I help leaders, organizations, individuals manage change. And I started that journey back in 1997 when I started studying neuro-linguistic programming, NLP for short. And really that is a fantastic toolbox of language techniques that helps you communicate with people in a really powerful way and also gives really strong models of how people make sense of the world. And if you understand the kind of building blocks of how people take information out and put information back in, then you can really start to think about how could we, communicate more powerfully? How are people communicating with us, which is really revealing a lot about their inner world and the map they've made of that world, because people really reveal how they make sense of the world in their language. So that's what NLP is about. And then,
I'm curious if I could stop you right there, because I would love a real life example. Is there something that you've experienced that you would say is like a telltale sign that this person is going through X, Y, Z?
Yeah, well, I'll just give you some really simple examples that you can pick up all the time, which is see, hear, feel. And so people say things like, I can't see that happening. And that means they're not able to make a picture of it in their head. And so then if you're a leader, you might need to like literally show them what it could look like a photograph of the finished project or a slide of what it's going to look like when it's finished. So when people, if people say, I can't see that happening, you might need to help them visualize it. That's just a really simple example and if they say, I don't feel that's right, I don't feel that's right. If you give someone some information, like data and information, to say that doesn't feel right. And then you could ask them, so then what do you feel when I tell you that? Like, what do you feel is missing? So you say the word back to them because they're actually looking for a feeling before they can move forward and say yes. So, for example, in a sales process, if someone says, I don't feel that's right, more information is not going to help them. You need to understand what they're actually feeling and then work with that emotion. So there's like a couple of simple examples of NLP in action. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Mind blown. Like I've been in communications for 20 years as well. But when I hear about thinking about things in a different way, like this, for example, I've never heard of it, brought up like that. Like, sure, maybe intuitively, this person is more wants to feel things. They're maybe more emotionally tied, or perhaps this person is really visual and they need to see something to imagine, or this person's a list person and they need like bullet points to get through it. And it's really is telling. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to pay attention to that. Now.
And if people you might also, a lot of people say, I hear what you're saying. Right. And so like they're telling you they're an auditory person. Like they're literally saying it, or, So I think this is just really simple tools and techniques to decode people's language and the language they're feeding you. And just paying it, if you paid 10% more attention to what people actually said in terms of word content, you would be able to build a 100% better bridge to them. Yeah. And I see this all the time, groups of people are working with a leader, and I'll sit in on a meeting that a leader is, hosting or leading. And it's really telling to sit back and listen. It's like, okay, that person's saying hear all the time. That person's saying see all the time. That person's saying feel all the time. But the leader only has one way to language things. And so the leader's getting 30% of the audience on board at one time. But if the leader went back and said it as visualize the idea and then ask people how they felt about what he's saying or she's saying, then you would get, you would cover all your bases. And so even if you just took something simple like that away and just took it and put it in your toolkit, I need to say it, I need to show it, and then I need to ask people how they feel, you would get much deeper connection and communication going on in your meetings and communication.
Right. And that's just honoring people's differences and diversities. And I read a study recently that was interesting and about this very, how people learn. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because we have our tendency to gravitate towards a certain learning model. However, that may not necessarily be the one that helps us grow the most, right? So challenging ourselves to be more auditory, if we're more visual, et cetera, is always a good thing. But I found that interesting. However, you need to present all the options. And I think that meeting prep is probably the most important missing piece in the majority of meetings out there. What would you say about that?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm a facilitator. I'm out working, running workshops all the time. And I'm constantly thinking about, how am I covering my bases, So in terms of meeting prep, I think that, slides are used very often now in meetings. So the visual part came in, but I think also people rely a bit too much on slides now and visual information. And I think one of the most important things in meetings that, if you're hosting or leading a meeting, is to really think about, see, hear, feel, and really think about how quickly can I get through my information and get a conversation going and let people interact with the information. And so we tend to, if people say, if someone who's presenting at a meeting says, I've got I've got a 30-minute slot to present. They fill the whole thing up with data. And actually what you should do, which is, in this sort of heavy information-based working world that we live in, people might think, I've only got 30 minutes to present the information. But what they should be really thinking about is how much information can these people actually retain from my presentation?
Exactly.
Right? And it's like, I can present you with 60 slides in 30 minutes, which is like, I would call that a crime against humanity.
Death by PowerPoint.
What would happen if I presented 7 slides and had people interact with them, and at the end they had 3 or 4 key bullet points that they could take away and remember? Because it's not about how much information you can present, it's how much your audience can retain. And so I had a meeting yesterday with a client. I'm doing a couple of workshops for them. And they came to me with like this long list of things they wanted to achieve in Q3 and Q4 with their teams around their culture. And they showed me their 6 culture principles, and they showed me the 15 bullet points beneath each of these culture principles. It's like, we have to embed all of this. And I was like, you know what? Why don't you just pick one principle that would like be the dominant, that have the biggest domino effect? And what would happen if we just drilled down really hard on it for 6 months and just kept going back to it, kept talking about it, kept going over it? Now, you're American originally, correct?
Born and raised American, but with a dual citizenship. My mother's Swedish, so I grew up with the very Swedish household as well as the American household, and both of my parents are very, good examples of each culture. Right.
But like, America got this communication monster, turn up in its culture a decade ago named Donald Trump. Right? And he did it by just saying 3 things over and over again. Right? Finish these sentences. We're going to make
America great again.
Great again, right? Everybody around the world knew that. And then we're going to build a great big
wall.
And who's going to pay for it?
Mexico.
Right? And so, like, the power of repetition, and I'm not a Donald Trump fan, but you have to give him credit that he was able to just push a message through and make it hypnotic. And
terrifying, but smart. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah, terrifying. I wish the party that's opposing him would learn that lesson. Yeah, and because I'm not a Donald Trump fan, but but this is the power of a repeated communication over time. It becomes hypnotic, and it becomes the culture, and it becomes something that everybody can gather around and understand. So at this meeting yesterday, we ended up just working out, we're going to talk about this particular culture principle and 3 key behaviors under it. And all we're going to do is spend the next 6 months just pushing it out over and over again and making sure people are putting it into practice and measuring them on it. And it's like, if we can get this happening, all the other culture principles will get a domino effect happening.
They will fall. They will fall in line for sure. It's all about the snowball.
But it's
effect.
just recognizing that in corporate communications, that people get so much information pushed at them, but it's better to just have a simple message, a lot of repetition, and just to take that message into your meetings, take that into your. That's what I do with my kids, right? It's like every day.
Right.
So a simple message. This is our values. This is what we do. This is how we do it here. Repeat it over and over again. So I think, when it comes to bad meetings, it's like too much information, not enough repetition, and basically understanding that you give people data, but you want them to get the insights, right? So this is our plan for Q2. What does it mean? What will it achieve? How will it affect you? So the data.
How will it affect you?
How will it affect you? Or even better language, my mistake, what's the benefit for you?
Sure.
Yeah. And then really just giving people a chance to interact with it. Because I think, we just have so much data in our working lives now that we have to move through, that people really want insights as quickly as possible about the data. So don't leave that to chance. Your job at the meeting is to actually make sure they take away the insights and the benefit for themselves. And they walk away going, great, we're going to do this, this, and this, and it's going to achieve this, this, and this. Yeah.
Right. And the perfect world, that's exactly how every meeting would go. But
yeah.
Malcolm, we live in an imperfect world. Yeah. And I know that you've had meetings that did not go like that. And the meeting that we talked about sharing with the audience here today, I really love it because, like I said, we don't need to have something super current. It does not need to be something that is, something crazy that happened. Or what we really want is we want an original story by you that helps shape who you are and the professional that you are today. So if we could start, if you could break it down the story for us, where were you? Who were you at that time? What happened? And then we'll go into, after that, we'll talk about what went wrong.
Right. So we talked about when I first became a leader, right? And I was I was maybe 27 years old, and I got my first proper leadership role, which, and back in those days, I was working blue collar, working in a factory, and I worked my way up to, running a little department with one other person. But then I got the job of becoming the manager of the whole factory. And suddenly I was in charge of about 30 people, a day shift and a night shift, running a production line at a printed circuit board factory in Sydney, Australia. And suddenly I went from being people's colleague to being their boss, which is always really challenging step to take. And suddenly I had all of these people and I was trying to manage it all. And after about 2 weeks, the owner of the company stepped in and said, right, so we're in chaos right now. And I learned that there's a very big difference between managing and leading, and that there is a really important aspect of being in control that I had no idea about when I was sitting on the other side, just working, doing my little task in the factory, running my little area in the factory with one other person. But as soon as I had to deal with 30 people and all of their problems, all of their challenges, keeping things going, running a production line, making sure the stuff's coming in the front door and going out the back door, it was completely different. And I had to learn the very difficult lesson of managing people and leading people and what the difference was. But also I was trying to be their friend, and because I was doing that, I was not being their manager or their leader. And so it was probably the best professional cold shower I could have possibly ever gotten. And of course, being around 27, maybe 28 at that time, it was a really big personal development growth that I had to go through and went through. And that led me to being absolutely fascinated with the topic of leading and managing and how do you do it. And that became my magnificent obsession over the last 25 years.
Your aha moment. All of us entrepreneurs have it, right? It's when we realize that what we're doing is not what we need to be doing, or one of those. But I want to ask you, Malcolm, how did you realize and who brought this to your attention? Was it you that first said, okay, things aren't going as I'd hoped. I need to get some, a manager or a mentor in here to help me. Did you get called in? Like, what happened there?
Yeah, it was, really if I recall correctly, it's quite a while ago, but I think it was the owner of the company just walked into my office and sat on the edge of my desk and, basically said, so it's not working. What's happening? And then, I kind of, spoke about it and was, really saying, but, I've been doing this and I've been doing that and blah, 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 and defending myself probably, in this moment. And he said, you're making a critical mistake, which is you're trying to be their friend instead of being their boss. And it was a really light bulb moment, because he said something which I'd never really thought about. He said, you don't need to be their friend for them to do their job well and to do the job they're getting paid to do. If you're their friend, it's a bonus, but it's actually not required. And I thought that was like for me, that was a really big light bulb moment. It's like, they're here to do a job and they're getting paid to do a job, and your job is to give them everything they need to do that job. And if they like you, that is a bonus on top of it, but that is actually not required for them to do their job. Mm-hmm. And so this is when I started to build a map in my head of, understanding how to, making sure people were, you want people to be happy at work and to, and to be satisfied in their job and all of those things. But the primary thing is, the people who are tasked to do a job have to do the job, right? Mm-hmm. And that was really that hard and soft part of leading, the hard part of keep holding people to a standard, making sure they understand their job and that they do their job and that they turn up on time to do their job, and that all of these different things, and being willing to hold people to being accountable was really quite challenging. I wasn't really prepared for that. I thought people would just turn up and do the work and do it great, because that's my model of the world. You turn up and do the best you can every day. And, I was raised that, you're getting paid to do a job. So you should turn up,
at least on time,
on time, sober, and
right. And that too.
Willing. And you do the job great because you should, right?
Yeah.
But then this led to a whole kind of understanding of, over many years of working, and I had many different teams, sales teams and different teams that I had over my professional life. But it really led me to really trying to work out, how do you have control but not be controlling? Mm-hmm. And none of us want to have a micromanager, but right, none of us want that. And I think that old style of leadership, is not to be encouraged. But your job as a leader is to be in control of everything that you're leading. Because if you're not in control, you're not leading, you're not managing properly. And so there was those two words, control and controlling, and understanding the key difference between the two was really what led me to developing the ideas that I share with audiences. And when I'm coaching leaders, this is what we're talking about. Really helping them understand how to have strategies and structures that will help them be in control so they can be less controlling. Mm. And there's this really big movement out in the workplace now of no hierarchy, everything's flat, empower people. And I think that a lot of younger leaders that I work with, they're really struggling because they're so desperate not to be controlling that they lose control. And so there's this really fine balance that you have to go through. And that's kind of why I developed all the models that I had. So, yeah, it was a really big light bulb moment for me about those two things, being in control but not being controlling, and that delicate balance that comes with that, and how do you do it. So that's been what I've been working out for the last 25 years. And I've, I coach people, but I learn so much from the people I coach as well. And I work with so many different types of leaders in different industries who have different challenges for different reasons. But if you can come up with some basic principles of how to lead people and some basic understandings of that, then you can find your own style and your own way to move forward with it.
You said basic principles, and that's something that I feel strongly about, and I talk about a lot, especially on this show, is that we are given, so many of us have so much incredible education on the topics that we're professionals in and experts in, right? We have many years of postgraduate education, PhDs, blah, 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 but yet we never learn these basic fundamentals of how to lead. And, in my mind, that's sort of the root of the problem. But until we can address that as a society, what would you say to let's say, someone who is in your position now that you were in when you were 27 years old? They have a job. They have their buddies, their friends at work, they go out for beers afterwards, they work together, they, complain together sometimes, as we all do, right? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you worked so hard, you're promoted to manager, and boom, now you're in charge of your buddies that you used to complain with, and they know all of your deepest, darkest secrets. Yeah. What does that person do to be able to reestablish boundaries and have a little bit of control without be controlling?
Yeah. And I was kind of chuckling to myself when you said we're also educated because, I didn't finish high school. I didn't go to university, and I had to learn everything that I learned, sort of being an autodidact. I had to educate myself. And,
there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. I think we overvalue education in this society. And that's coming from someone with 2 very expensive master's degrees where I learned the majority of what I know in the workplace and not in those courses.
I always say to my audience right at the beginning, I'm a high school dropout, who learned by doing. But what I would say to someone who's in that position, okay, you get promoted to being a leader of a team. Usually you start with a small group of people, which is actually harder than a bigger group of people. Because if you only have 2 people to lead, it's a really flat hierarchy. Whereas if you have 20 people, then you're going to probably have some people as sort of in the middle who are maybe helping you, like lead, like 2 sub-managers or something like that. But let's just take that scenario. Let's say you get a group of 6 people to manage, and you've been colleagues, but now you've been promoted. So the first thing you do is you have a meeting and you say, so now I'm your leader. So that means I need your permission to give you the feedback that you need to thrive, and that our relationship, even though we're still going to be friends and friendly, means that I have a professional responsibility to deliver results and make sure that you're growing and your career is going up. So you kind of need to have that first conversation about there's going to be a change in how we communicate expectations, and just be really transparent about the fact that this is new to me. I'm probably going to make some mistakes. I'll be asking for your help and feedback, but basically I need your permission now to take the role of leader in our relationship. Because I think if you do that, it's much better than going through the process of like slowly kind of asking, is it okay if I give you feedback? Being a bit meek. It's like, okay, so here I am. This is my new role. I'm going to be giving you feedback. I need your permission to give you feedback. I need your permission to let me lead you now. It's a much faster way to go forward.
At least setting it up, right? Setting up the foundation so that when you are in a position where that feedback needs to be given, you can say, hey, remember when we had that talk about feedback? Is it all right if we start now? Because sometimes people might not be expecting it or aren't in the right headspace. And I think that's a really smart way to set it up. Be completely transparent at the beginning. You know what? Things have changed. This is not about our relationship anymore. We still have what we have, but now it's about, okay, what's best for the company? What's best for the team? And that's what I want to help us do.
And best for you. And best for you. Right. Because now I'm in charge of your professional
development
path and development. And that means that I need to be the person who can help you with these things and, move you forward. So for me, this is a really key sort of moment where you need to take a separate meeting and just do this. And then set out at that meeting your expectations, for the team, and then ask the team for their expectations of you.
Smart.
Right? So if you spend an hour doing that, you've probably saved yourself a year of stress. If you don't.
Right?
Yeah. Because
then you're going to play catch up with every single one of your team members individually, 100%. Explaining to them why things have changed and why you're doing what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've been in the position 3-4 4 times where I got promoted over people in a team. Like I came into an organization, I performed really, really well, so I got promoted. Someone who's now my team member got passed over, and there's some resentment or stress in the team, or friction rather, about the fact that, I got chosen and someone who was there longer than me didn't.
It's natural. It happens, right? You can't help to, people say, keep business and, feeling separate, but I think that's literally impossible. And I think it's dangerous message.
It's not only impossible, it's naive, and it's ignoring reality. Like, it's just not how humans are. I literally just had a coaching call where someone said, I feel like I'm making decisions emotionally, and how can I stop that? And it's like, well, you can die, and then your emotions will stop. But other than that, I don't know another process.
I love it. I might steal that from you.
Emotions.
You'll die.
I don't recommend dying as a strategy for managing this, but I said just recognize that emotion is going to be part of every decision you ever make, but hopefully you have some emotional control, but we're just never going to not have our mind and our emotions connected, because that's the human animal. So, but I've been in situations where I got passed over, and I would also name it. I would literally say, James, I know you are hoping to be promoted, and you are part of this process, and I think you're a very valuable team member. But for whatever reason, the management have decided I'm in the position now, and I hope I'll have your support. Yeah, and I'm sure another promotion will come to you very, very soon. Because that's the way to say it straight up and really address the elephant in the room. And I think, in my experience, there have been very few times where I've seen that happen in a meeting. And Malcolm, how about you? Have you been able to see teams evolve and develop and be able to get to this place of trust where they can have these types of conversations? And how long does that take? Because I know we were talking about one culture goal that's going to be months and months and months of returning to, which I think people don't get with change management, is that you literally have to do the, atomic habits, one small thing every single day to build up to it. So, yeah. Yeah. So, from my perspective, it's about setting very clear expectations and then repeating them over and over again. And what I always like to do is to leverage reputation. So, what do I mean by that? So if I started leading a team, we're still staying with our hypothetical new manager. It's like, this team's really great. We've got great, but one of the things that I really want this team to have is an absolutely golden reputation in the company for not only what we do, but how we do it. So let's set up some, expectations I have of you in what that would look like, and then you can also give me expectations as a leader of what you want from me. But we're going to have these things, and we're going to hold them our standard of excellence of how we operate, how we interact, everything, so that every time someone thinks of this group, they think, great, right? Their emotion about us is positive, and whenever we make a mistake, that will be we're always going to have mistakes and problems, but our reputation will be so golden that people will forgive us our mistakes. So I love to leverage reputation, because then it takes it out of it's not the ego of the leader, it's not the team, but it's actually saying people are going to be looking at us, and everything that each person in the team does every day is either raising the reputation of the team or lowering it down. And people will do much more for other people often than they'll do for themselves, right? Now, if you and I...
Isn't that true? Isn't that true?
I both were meeting at the gym to do a workout, but both of us were at home individually not feeling like we should do a workout, we're probably still going to turn up to the gym because we said we were going to. But if I was doing the gym workout for myself, I'd probably end up on the sofa eating chips. Right? So this is where accountability and reputation are fantastic levers for young leaders to press on, because it gives you a chance to kind of create something bigger than just what you're saying to the team, but just showing the team that we can build something here that will really grow and develop over time into this reputation, which is going to reflect golden light onto you. So everybody has that responsibility. And so, I think
empowering from the beginning, right? You're essentially, I like the, you called it the team's excellence, right? The rules of excellence, or how did you phrase it?
Yeah.
Standards of excellence.
Yeah.
And I've used a different word, but I like this better because I find it more inspiring, as rules of engagement, right? Having the rules of engagement where we talk about, but rules of engagement can sound a little bit like wah, wah, like let's all just sit in here and complain. So standards of excellence. I love that. So setting that up in the beginning. So what I've heard from you for new managers, people who are in a position where they're promoted above their peers, number one, complete transparency, have a meeting about expectations, and then also set up sort of the golden carrot, set up like what it is you want others to recognize about your team and what you've achieved together. And, you're right. It's not the results. I mean, results come from well-functioning teams, and well-functioning teams are recognized. And if there's recognition and well-functioning teams, success is going to happen. So I really like that idea of starting first with the relationship rather than the results, because usually you hear it the other way around, which of course results matter, and you're going to be able to target everybody in the room. But like you said, there are different ways to reach different people. And that some people really want to harp on and focus on the results, and others really want to make sure that they're, they're empowered and they're inspiring and they're doing great things and leading in a better direction. So thanks for putting that out there, because I don't hear it often.
Yeah. And then there's one other thing that I think is really important, which is understanding the difference between management and leadership. And
tell me more.
A distinct way of doing that. And I've built this model, which I call hustle and serve. Hustle being the American word for being busy getting things done. And then, of course, serve. And then management is hustle. It's really task focused. It's about who's doing what. How much resources do we have? Are we on track? And so you have meetings where you're just talking about the hustle. But then when I ask audiences, tell me about the quality of a leader that you had that you really admired. And I'll have an audience and I'll get my flip chart out and I'll just write down, I'll ask you, Erika, what's a quality of a leader that you had that you really admired? What was the quality?
Confidence.
Confidence, great. So you're confident. Someone else will say listening. Someone else will say empathy. Someone else will say inspiring. They pushed me. They, all of these different qualities of character. And when I compare the list, because I ask people, what are you hustling on? What do you spend all your time doing? It's emails, meetings, hiring, firing, all this stuff. When we compare the two lists of the hustle and serve, you see on the serve side, there's no tasks, none. And nothing on the serve side can you get a university qualification in. It's qualities of character, right? And so as a leader, you need to understand that these are the two wings of the bird that make it fly, the hustle and the serve. But the really important thing of that you'll see in great leaders is they'll walk into a room and they can switch. I got to hustle, I got to serve. So I teach my leaders, when you walk into the room, quickly assess. You might have an agenda, like I got to come in today and hustle and get these people moving and selling more or whatever. But then you realize people are really energetically down. Maybe they had a big loss.
Sure.
They didn't
That's
get
not the vibe in the room.
And you walk in the room and realize, my hustle is going to fall on deaf ears, so now I need to serve. And that ability that great leaders have to walk into a room and switch between those two things really quickly, instinctually, that to me is the highest level of a leader, when they really understand what role they need to play to be really dynamic and moving between the two and to balance the two, which is the hardest thing, right? That's leaders. I walked into a company I did a workshop for back in 2018, last year, and this guy looked at me and said, "Hustle and serve, guy." 4 years later.
There you go. It's catchy.
He said, we talk about that all the time at our leadership meetings. We say, I've been hustling too much. I've got to serve more. I haven't served my people enough. So it's a great way to remember it, the difference between the two, but also that recognition of like balance, trying to balance those things in the best way possible so that, you can sit back and think, as a leader, if I look at my meeting and my calendar, do I have any time in my calendar to serve? And I often talk to, one of the first things I do when I'm coaching leaders is, okay, let's open your calendar. Let's look at how you're spending your time. And,
sure.
Do you have any time to serve your people?
And when you say serve, Malcolm, I think there's could be a lot of assumptions or definitions that come out of that. Give me an example of how a leader would serve somebody on their team or serve their team as a whole.
It could be encouraging them. It could be giving them feedback, positive or constructive. It could be just sitting down and saying, "How are you doing? We haven't had a chance to speak for a while. What can I help you with?" That famous line from, what is that book called? The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, It's like,
classic.
What can I help you with? Right? What can I support you with? What's the best way for me to support you now? It could be challenging. Like, Erika, I think you're doing good work, but I just see a whole other level for you in the way you're leading meetings, blah, blah, blah. What are some goals we could set for you to help you professionally develop? Because I feel like you're cruising, and you're allowed to cruise if you want to, but I would love for you to be too qualified and too valuable to keep this job in 1, 2, 3 years. How can I help you grow? Right? So there's a lot of things, just even listening, right? Tell me what's happening with the project. How do you feel about it? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? Tell me, because I can see the spreadsheets on my own, but I need to hear from you.
What's going on?
Right? Yeah. So all of these kind of things, just making a space to have a human conversation and develop the human person in a way that will make them feel valued and grow.
And one thing that this sort of brings to mind for me is the controlling versus the control. So how do we, in those type of environments where we need to be empathetic, where we need to step into somebody else's shoes, ask them how they are, really listen to what they're saying to us? How can we do that in a way that still maintains our position as a leader, as somebody who's, supportive, but yet you're not taking it too far? At what point do you draw that line and that boundary and say, okay, let's talk about this after work, right?
Yeah. Also, even, I think, there's a famous technology company called me about a year ago and said, could you please come in and talk to our leaders about professional distance? Because they have got so cozy with their teams, they can't give their teams feedback. So I think your job as a leader, is to be friendly, to support them. Occasionally you will become friends. That happens, and that's a beautiful thing about working life. Have people that I've collected over the years. You collect 1 or 2 people from different parts of your career in each chapter.
I'm a collector as well. I love that word. I'm glad to hear another person using it.
But just recognize that most of the people that you work with are going to cycle in and out of your life. Like 99% of the people that you work with professionally are not going to be your friends. So I think there's a couple of things here that I want to just touch on, because I feel like for a lot of young leaders, this is where the struggle is. Where's that line? So your job is to develop this person as the professional person that is in your team or in your area. So help them grow professionally. If they're having a personal challenge, help them get resources to fix it, but not necessarily be the person that fixes it for them. because then you start to become more of a friend. Even sometimes I see leaders babysitting people. If somebody has a challenge, help them solve it, but don't solve it for them. Yeah, unless it's a company problem.
Sure.
But I would say that for me, the real line is, am I now helping this person? Like, you can help someone professionally a lot, and it's still a professional relationship. But if they have an addiction, if they have personal problems in their life, if they're struggling psychologically because of past trauma or something like that, outsource it. Organize them psychological services, help them arrange it, point them in the right direction, but try and set up for yourself boundaries of where you feel it's your responsibility and where it isn't.
Sure. Yeah. And I think there's a difference in telling somebody, I'm so sorry what you're going through. I understand. I've been there before. Mm-hmm. Or I know where you are. I've been somewhere like that. But then there's okay, you know what? Like, there are some resources here that I can, give you that can help you through this, because I am not an expert in this. Exactly. Right. And there are experts in this area for a reason. So I think that's really smart advice.
Yeah. And saying, I think you should see a psychologist about this. Or, sometimes it's better because the person gets to have also their privacy as well and express themselves privately. But I think this is a very challenging area there's no blanket rule about it. But I think because everyone has their own values about what's appropriate and what's not. But I think the most important thing is, I'm here to develop this person professionally and to deliver great results for the organization. And then other things that come up that are on the personal side, I need to manage that the best way so that this person is still a functional person inside the organization. And then also accept that this person has a whole life outside the organization that they're also dealing with. And to be empathetic to that.
And which is not easy to do these days, because it seems, and tell me if you agree from where you sit, Malcolm, is that these days the expectations of the employee are to have much more of an involvement in your life, whatever that looks like, personal and professional life, because these days it's much more intertwined than it used to be. So the expectation of employees is to, yes, I expect these resources or these development tools, X, Y, Z, but it doesn't mean that you as a manager need to be the one to facilitate that or to guide them or coach them along that path. Exactly. So I think that's really smart, especially for people pleasers. Hi, that's me. And Malcolm, I have a feeling you might be or were one of those people as well, just based on our conversation.
I wasn't really so much a people pleaser, but I just really value human connection. Right. And so for me, that was where it was like really understanding you can have a great connection with people and still have professional distance. Like, I'm your boss. We have a great time when we're together, but there's very clear expectations on what I expect from you, and I will repeat them over and over again. And if you're having a problem, I'm going to help you solve it as best I can, but I still expect you to do your work and to do it to a standard of excellence, because that's actually why you're here at the company or here in the team. And and those two things can exist beautifully together. They're not mutually exclusive, despite what you might see on LinkedIn on a daily basis, right?
Right. I agree with you. And I think we have so much good content here, and I really hope that our listeners appreciate this. And if there's any questions or feedback, or good or bad, or constructive or not, please feel free to reach out to me, to either, we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we are on Apple Podcasts, and or on LinkedIn. You can reach out to us. Cool. And Malcolm, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, where's the best place to do that?
Through LinkedIn. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. And I also have my website, bravepd.com, PD for personal development. So, I'm very easy to find. I'm the only Malcolm Larri on the planet. So if you Google me, it's like I'm all over Google.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing all of your wisdom. And one final thought from you before we close out. You talked about the difference between a leader and a manager. And if you could sum that up into one nugget, what would that be?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hustle and serve. That's what it is. The manager is task focused and the leader is people focused. Right. The person focused. And to get that, just really work on having that balance, because you can't be a leader without also doing some management, and you can't be a manager with also doing some leadership. So just recognize that those two things go together. But if you can make that distinction for yourself, that the manager is task focused, results focused, and the leader is human, person focused, building relationship, trust, skills, talent, developing the person. If you put those two things together, you're going to win. But you have to make the distinction between the two so that you can develop a whole set of behaviors on one side and a whole set of behaviors on the other.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm such a visual person, and I'm going to do just this. When we hop off this call, I'm going to fold a piece of paper in half into exactly what we've talked about here.
Yeah.
Hustle and serve.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with before we sign off?
I just wish them all the best on their professional journey, and just to recognize that it is a journey and nobody jumps to the top of the ladder. You're going to make mistakes. I just want to say one more thing, because it's something I've been personally reflecting on, is that every time you go to a new level, you're going to make mistakes because you don't know the rules of the game, the territory, the unspoken things at that level, the expectations. And so in my 41 years of professional life, as I've climbed the ladder, every time I've gone up, it's been great, but I've also made mistakes at that new level, and that's given me new learnings and understandings to be able to go to the next level. And so just recognize that you're never going to be in a position where you're finished and done, where it's like, I know what I need to do. It's all going to be smooth. It's not like that, because every level has a new level of expectation and that you need to rise up to. And that is the joy and journey of professional life, that there is no ceiling on your growth. There is no ceiling on how far you can take it. And
I don't even think we need the word professional in there, just life, right? Just being open-minded. And at 27, I think a lot of us think that we know everything, but that's the beauty of growing and experiences in the professional world and in the personal world.
Yeah, and be patient. We just see so many young people being super impatient on their journey, and it's like, you've got time, be patient, climb the ladder one step at a time, enjoy the ride, you'll get there.
Right. Wise words. Thank you so much, Malcolm. And thanks everyone for listening. And if you have a bad meeting story to tell, feel free to reach out. We'd love to have you on as a guest. Thanks so much.